What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Chuds BBQ. My name is Bradley Robinson, and today I'm gonna go over my top 5 master ratios for making perfect, juicy, plump sausages at home. Coming up! Thank you, Bespoke Post, for sponsoring this video. One of the most frequent questions I get in comments, emails, and DMs is how do I go about making my sausage recipes? How do you know how much salt, binder, and pink salt and spices to put into a sausage where you know it's gonna come out perfect every time? And luckily, there are 5 master ratios that I use in every single sausage I make, and I'm always really happy with the results. So that being said, that's what we're going over today, and it is going to be delicious. This is some meat. What I got here is 2 chunks of lean brisket and some cubed up pieces of pork butt. So what I'm gonna do now is just go through and take the fat cap off of this brisket real quick. Get that nice and cubed up. Beautiful. And the reason we take the fat off of the meat is so we can dial in the perfect fat ratio, which is ratio number 1. Now, generally speaking, sausages are a lot fattier than your average burger or meatloaf. And that's why they always come out nice and juicy and super flavorful. And my general rule of thumb is to stick anywhere between an 80-20 and a 70-30 meat to fat ratio. But that can change on a few different factors. In a perfect world, I would use 100% lean meat and have some fat back on hand so I could really dial in that perfect 70-30 ratio. But because I'm using brisket and pork butt, they both have a lot of intramuscular fat that we need to account for. So what I've got here is 2 pounds of brisket, 2 pounds of pork butt, and 1 pound of beef fat. And again, because of the fat in the pork butt and the brisket, we should end up with a perfect 70-30 ratio. But if you're in the mood for a slightly less greasy sausage, you could always pull that fat level back a little bit. Or if you're gonna be adding other fatty ingredients like bacon to your sausage, you could pull it back a little bit to help compensate for it. But as long as you're within the ballpark of the 80-20, 70-30 ratio, you're gonna have some nice juicy links. So into the freezer, this tray goes for these to get nice and chilled so we get a clean grind. Well, we talk about ratio number 2, salt. For me, I always stick with a 2% salt ratio. That's what I've used on pretty much every sausage on this channel, because that's the number I've found works out best to have a really nice flavored sausage that really lets the meat shine through without ever being too salty and overpowering. But again, it does come down to personal preference. If you're a little more sensitive to salt, you might want to drop it down to a 1.5% or somewhere in the middle. And if you're really new to making sausage, you can always start at 1.5 and do a little test patty and add more salt if you think it needs it. But 90% of the time, I stick with 2% salt to the weight of the meat, and it always works out perfect. One more thing to consider is what you're adding to your sausage. If you're doing a bacon and cheese studded sausage, those are both really salty items, so that's when I might pull back to a 1.6 or 1.5% salt ratio. But for the most part, 2% kosher salt. I like kosher salt because it's got a bigger granule size and will disperse more evenly throughout the sausage as opposed to something like table salt. But because we're dealing in ratios here, I don't think it really makes all that much of a difference. Master ratio number 3 is our pink curing salt. Pink curing salt number 1 is what I use, and we only need a little bit. 0.25% pink salt to the weight of your meat and fat is what I do every single time. And if you're doing a fresh sausage like a brat or something like that, you really don't need to use this. The only time to use pink salt is when you're gonna be doing a cold smoke, which is something I like to do on my smoky sausages. And the reason this helps is because when you're putting meat into a smoker at below 150 degrees, that meat is in what's called the danger zone, which means it's a perfect environment for bacteria to form and botulism to thrive, which is something we definitely don't want. So the reason we add the pink salt and the nitrates is because we want everything to stay safe, and this is how we're gonna do it. So again, 0.25% pink salt if you're gonna be doing a low and slow cook. And it also helps out with the texture and the color of your meat. That's why all charcuterie has a nice pinkish hue to it. It's because of the cure. And it's just gonna help out with that nice charcuterie sausage vibe. So, pink salt, number 1, 0.25%. Master ratio number 4 for making sausage, according to Chud, is your binder. Using a binder is a really great way to guarantee success when making sausage because it's just gonna add extra protein to your link, which is gonna help the emulsion of the meat and fat, as well as maintaining all the moisture that you put into your sausage link. If you've ever had a sausage that's really crumbly and the water and the fat have leached out of it and it looks all shriveled up, it's probably because there wasn't a binder in that sausage. Now, that being said, a binder is not entirely necessary. I've made plenty of sausages without them that have turned out great, but you just really need to make sure you get the proper protein extraction when you're mixing the sausage together. But even still, when I was making 80 pounds of sausage a week professionally without a binder, it was still very hit or miss whether or not there was a good bind on that sausage. But ever since I started putting binders like this into my links, they have all been nice and plump, nice and snappy, and nice and juicy. So, highly recommended. As far as binders go, there are several different types. I like to use milk powder. You can use the stuff from the store, or you can get this stuff from the sausage maker. This is high temp milk powder, which is designed specifically for sausage making. Works really well. If you don't want to do a dairy-based binder, you can also find soy-based binders. One of my favorites is C-Bind. It's a carrot fiber binder, which works really well. It's a lot stronger than the milk powder, so you can get away with using a a lot less of it. But what I've found with milk powder is anywhere from 2 to 4% of the weight of your meat and fat is what you're aiming for. For me, I like them really plump and snappy, so I usually go full 4%. I think the same goes for soy binders, but I don't really have much experience with those. And with the C-bind, the carrot binder, I found that 0.5% works really well, which is great because for a 5-pound batch, I'm gonna add 90 grams of milk powder. But if I was using the C-bind, it would be only 11 grams of that. This video is brought to you by Bespoke Post, a monthly membership delivering boxes of top shelf goods from under the radar brands right to your home. And it's free to join. Every month they ship cool new products like outdoor gear, barware, home and kitchen goods, clothing, and more, even live oysters. Products you receive are based on a preference quiz you fill out when signing up. And the box lineup changes every month, and each box has around a $70 value but only costs $45. As I mentioned, 90% of the products in Bespoke Post boxes come from small business, many of which are based right here in the United States. And the best part is you only pay for what you want. You'll get assigned boxes each month based on that membership quiz, and before each box is shipped, you'll have the option to accept it, swap it out for a different box, or skip the month entirely free of charge. The first box I got was the split box, which includes this awesome hatchet. And I gotta say, this thing is pretty sweet. That'll come in handy for chopping wood. The next box was this little guy. It's a little handheld fishing pole. Oh, look at that, there's a little compartment. Got some hooks right in the top. That's convenient. Y'all know how much I love fishing. And last but not least, I got the smoked box, which is for making smoke-infused cocktails. Ooh, came with a torch too. Ooh. To get 20% off your first box, click the link in the description of this video and use code chudsbbq20. Again, link in description. That's bespokepost.com/chudsbbq20 or use code chudsbbq20 at checkout to get 20% off your first box. Thank you, Bespoke Post. So into our bowl, we're going in with our milk powder, our kosher salt, and our pink curing salt. And the fifth and final ratio that we are looking for when making sausage is our liquid component, which for me is usually water. I've used all sorts of things as far as the liquid component is concerned. Stock, beer, tomato juice. It really depends on what the flavor profile is you're going for with your sausage. But for me, I've found that whatever you put in there really doesn't have much of a flavor impact on your sausage anyway, which is why I usually just stick with water. I really like to add water instead of ice, because sometimes the ice chunks can form little pockets in your sausage, so when they melt, you're gonna have a little hole. It's kind of weird. It does work really well for keeping everything cold, which is a pretty important part of sausage making. But the liquid is there to help hydrate your spices, add some juiciness to your links, but most importantly, it's gonna help with that texture. Because when we mix this up with all the water, it's gonna kind of turn into a paste a little bit and give us a really nice tight bind that kind of sticks to your hand, as opposed to something like a burger where you don't want to work it at all. We're doing the exact opposite for sausage making, and adding some liquid to your links can really help out. So 10% of the total weight of your meat and fat is what I stick with every single time. Again, it really depends on what you're putting in your sausage. If you're filling it full of jalapenos or tomatoes or something that's got a high water content to it, you could dial it back to 5% liquid, but most of the time I find 10% works perfectly. And that is it. That is my 5 ratios for sausage making that I use to make every single one of my recipes. With the fat content, we know the sausage is gonna be nice and juicy. With the binder, we know it's gonna be nice and plump. Perfect amount of salt to be flavorful. We got the liquid in there to help with the texture and add some more juiciness. And then we've got the pink salt to make sure everything is safe. And if we just ground all this up right now, we would have a perfectly fine tasting link. It'd just be a little boring. So now we're gonna add some more spices. So we're gonna keep this sausage pretty basic today. Just kind of build a nice foundation for adding whatever other ingredients you want. But these are the usual suspects that make it into pretty much all of my sausage recipes. Starting with some black pepper, some mustard powder, some paprika, some cayenne, and of course, some granulated garlic. And how I determine how much of these to add is a little formula I came up with a while back, just through trial and error of different ratios, is 0.5% of whatever you want your main flavor profile to be. So for this one, we're going kind of straight down the road, savory, German, Central Texas style. So 0.5% of garlic and mustard going in. From there, I think about secondary flavors. Things that I want to be in there, whether it's for color or just for a little background note. And for that, I will do 0.25%. So black pepper, 0.25%, and our paprika. From there, I think about the third tier, so I divide that in half one more time to get 0.15-ish% of cayenne. And this thought process of primary, secondary, and third tier spices has really worked well for me in developing sausage recipes, but it's not written in stone. You really just kind of got to think about it and use logic to determine how much of whatever it is you're going to be adding. You know, if you're going to be adding something like cumin or chili powder, something that's a little more powerful, you may want to scale it back a little bit, but as always, you can always adjust after you make a test patty. But that's it for our sausage mix today. Real simple, savory, salty, pretty common flavors, and this is pretty much the basis of every sausage I make. But from here, you can add whatever you want, depending on the flavor profile you're after. You know, you can add your jalapenos, you can add your cheese, whatever you want. But as long as you have your 5 main ratios covered, you're gonna have a nice, juicy, plump link, and from there, it's all about creativity and adding whatever you like. Out of the freezer, our meat comes, and it is nice and cold, but not rock solid, which is exactly where we want it to be. That way the fat doesn't start to render and smear on this very hot Texas day in the friction of this grinder. Through we go. Looking good. Got that nice crumbly texture we're after. Into our mixer, we go with our meat. In we go with our spices and our liquid. Beautiful, nice and sticky, nice and tacky. That's what we're after. Beep. Tie it off, snip the tip, and then we case. Just going for a nice, plump, average size wiener. And this is a 50-50 beef to pork sausage, but you can do pretty much whatever you like. You know, I've done all pork sausages, all beef sausages, chicken sausage, turkey sausage. I did a turkey and beef one that was really good. Pretty much any combination of meat will work out just fine as long as you have the fat content right. And there we have it, some beautiful plump looking weens. Although it looks like my original knot failed me, but that's all right. We'll use that as our little probe tester. So at this stage, best practice would be to pop this in your refrigerator just like this on a rack, uncovered overnight. What that's gonna do is allow time for the salt and the pink salt to really work on and start curing the meat. All the spices will hydrate and the meat will kind of bond together in its new sausage form. But most importantly, it's gonna help dry out the casings, which will make them a lot tackier so smoke can adhere better, but also letting all the little ties and twists between the links dry out so we can snip these apart without having sausage start coming out of the ends. But I don't wanna wait overnight. So what I like to do is take these on a rack just like this, and I'm gonna bring them in the house and aim a fan at them for the next 30 minutes or so while we get the pit fired up. And that'll accomplish the same thing of drying out the casings and making it so we can snip these apart and pop them onto the smoker. I swear one of these days I'm firing up that grinder for that pesky little snake in my boot. And after sitting in front of the fan, you can see these are looking a little bit darker, nice and dry, nice and tacky. So now we can go ahead and snip them apart. Looking good. On the pit they go. I'm gonna keep them on this little wire rack here just because my grates are kind of dirty, but we're gonna cold smoke these at around 120 to 150 degrees. Nice and smoky. Again, when you're doing stuff for charcuterie like bacon or cold smoking sausages, you really don't need to worry too much about clean smoke because at these low temperatures, these sausages are not gonna get too acrid. So we're gonna shut it down, keep it as smoky as possible. We wanna keep it under 150 degrees so we get some really nice color on there and some wonderful smoky flavor without rendering the fat or cooking these too quickly. I'll see y'all in about 4 hours. And just like that, these little links are coming off the pit, looking nice and smoky, nice and red, nice and plump. Oh, gotta love that. Off the pit they come, right into an ice bath. This is just gonna help stop the cooking process. It's really gonna help shrink up the casings to the meat, solidify any fat that may have rendered, and give us some perfect snappy sausages. After a nice soak in the ice water, these are fully chilled and coming out of the pit. Dry these off, and there we have it. Some beautiful looking, nice, red, plump sausage links, nice and clean. Because as we all know, everybody loves a clean weenie. The ends stayed tied together perfectly. Love it! And there we have it, folks. A beautiful mountain of some lovely, cold smoked, handmade sausages. I tell you what, these are way better than anything you can get at the store. And at this point, they have been salted, cured, and smoked. So if you pop these in a vac seal bag and pop them in your freezer, they will last forever, which is great. You know, make a big batch and then you can pull them out whenever you're ready for a weeknight dinner or a barbecue party or whatever you got going on. But for now, I want to see how these came out. So I'm going to take a few of these and pop them on this pit behind me, which is rocking about 300 degrees. And we're just going to bring them up to temp around 160 internal, which should only take about 20-30 minutes. Sausage Mountain. All right, without further ado, I think it's time to see how these beautiful, plump, red, smoky little weens came out. And there we go, folks. A beautiful, juicy, smoky red link. Beautiful emulsion on there. Smelling fantastic. Nice, snappy casing. Nothing's too crumbly. I mean, what's not to love about a beautiful homemade smoked sausage? Am I right? I think I'm right. Got some pretty big chunks of fat in there. I think that's because I use the top fat instead of the heel fat from a brisket. Usually I like to try and aim for the really hard fat that you get on the backside of a brisket, but I didn't feel like going deep diving in my freezer when I had the perfect amount of fat on hand. So that's probably why it didn't grind up and mix in so well, but I think it's still gonna be real tasty. That is perfect. Perfect amount of smoke, perfect amount of salt, nice and plump, savory, a little bit of kick on the back end. I mean, that's what sausage is all about, folks. Oh, gotta love that. Beautiful bind on there. Come on, what's not to love? And like I said, this is kind of a straight down the middle of the road sausage. No crazy flavors or garnishes or anything like that. This is kind of in your kielbasa territory. Just a nice, pleasantly smoky, little bit of heat. A snappy casing, super juicy, no complaints about this sausage. And again, this is dialed into my personal taste preferences, so if you give this a try for yourself, you may want to cut back on the salt, or maybe cut back on the cayenne, or add some more cayenne. You know, it's completely up to you, but I think this is a great place to start anyone out on their sausage making journey. You know, it's smoky, it's plump, it's juicy, very flavorful, and this is pretty much the basis of every sausage I make. It's so smoky, so juicy. I do love getting crazy and throwing bacon, egg, and cheese, or, you know, making pizza sausages. I've done it all. I made a stroganoff sausage one time, but there's something to be said about just a classic, straight down the middle of the road, just well-made, nice, smoky, snappy, plump link. Shall we see if it snaps? Oh yeah, look at that. Beautiful, juicy link. Gotta love it, folks. But I don't expect you to take just my word for this. I think it's time for the official taste test. All right, y'all, and that is it. That is my 5 master ratios for how I make every single sausage. To recap, it's your fat, salt, pink salt, binder, and liquid. And from there, you have a perfect blank canvas for making whatever kind of sausage you like. Whether you're adding more herbs or internal garnish like cheese or peppers or bacon or whatever, this is a perfect place to start. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I helped out some of you homemade sausage makers. I tell you what, I would have done some dirty things to have all this knowledge about 10 years ago when I first got into making sausage. But that being said, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, let me know by hitting that subscribe button. Let YouTube know by dropping a like on this video. Leave a comment down below letting me know what kind of sausage you want to see me make next. Big shout out to all the Patreon members. Thank you for supporting Team Chud and allowing me to keep making all these videos. And until the next time I see you, please go cook something outside. Peace!